Hello and welcome back. In this video, we're going to add the association between users and articles. Now that we have the users table, we can create users from the Rails console. Let's go ahead and add the association. So first thing you're going to notice is in order for us to have the association, we need this user ID column in our articles table. Okay, so let's go ahead and build that. First thing, we're going to create a feature branch. So git space checkout space -b, and we'll say user article -association, then hit enter. Now let's go ahead and create a migration file to add the column. So Rails generate migration, add user ID to articles. Okay, it created the migration file, so let's pull it up. So under DB, migrate the latest one right here, add user ID to articles. So within it, I'm going to say add underscore column. And if you remember, the first item would be the table. So colon articles. The second one is the column name. So colon user underscore ID. And then the third one will be the type. So colon integer. And the foreign key has to be type integer. Okay, save that. And let's go ahead and run this migration. So rake space db colon migrate. Okay, so it went ahead and added the column. Now I'm going to jump on Rails console and test it out. So article.all. All right, let's look at the last one. See user ID nil. So for each one, you'll see a column got added, user ID nil. Now so far we've been creating articles without a user. That's why all of the existing test articles we have will have no user ID associated with it. And from a data integrity standpoint, that's not that great, but we'll take care of that later. This is, after all, a development database, and we can drop it and recreate our data at any time, okay? So to create the association, first thing we're going to do is pull up our user.rb file, okay, which was open from before. I'm going to go to app, models, user.rb file. Over here on top, I'm going to say has underscore many space colon articles, since the user is the one side of the one-to-many association. Save that, and then I'll pull up my article model. Over here, I'm going to say belongs underscore to space colon user. User singular, since article is the many side of the one-to-many association. All right, believe it or not, that's all it takes to set up the association. Now, one thing I will add is going forward, I want to ensure all my articles have a user. Otherwise, we won't be able to save the article, okay? So we don't have scenarios where user ID is nil. So in order to enforce that, we have to add in another validation here. So I'll say validates colon user ID and presence colon space true. This means anytime I have an article that's getting created, it'll ensure that user ID is present. Now, while we're at this, there's one more item that I would like to add to my user.rb file. Notice here, it says validates email, presence true, and we have the case sensitivity set to false. One thing I want to do is anytime an email is created for a user, I want to set it to downcase at the database layer. So all my emails are basically stored in downcase. And how do we do that? We can use something called a before save. So it'll be before save space open curly brace self.email equals email.downcase. Okay? Space, close curly brace, save that. What this will do is before the user hits the database, it'll take the email value and then it'll turn it to lowercase by using this downcase method and then save it to the database. All right, now let's go ahead and test out our association. So over here in the Rails console, I'll exit and I'll restart it again. So let's create an article. Article equals article.new. Title, I'll say this is an article. Then description, I'll say new article description, close quote, close parentheses, hit enter. Now if I type in article.save, rollback transaction. So we must have hit validations. Let's check them out. Article.errors.full_messages. User can't be blank. Okay, so basically it's enforcing that we need a user ID. So let's pull up our article.new over here. You don't necessarily have to do user ID. You can refer to the user ID using the virtual attribute of user. Okay, you can just say user colon, and then since user is an object, I'm going to need to pass in a user. So I will just say grab the first user from our database. Okay, user.first. Here's something you have to remember. If you give it an ID, if you say user ID, then you have to pass in the ID of the first user. If you give it the user object, you have to pass in the user object, so user.first. And Rails is smart enough to take the ID and save it to that database. All right, hit enter. Okay, now if I type in article.valid, it says true. So article.save. Okay, check it out. I have a new article, and this one actually has a user ID. If I type in article.all, look at my last article that just got created. The user ID is 2, okay, which is our first user in our database. So if I do user.all, my first user is user ID 2. His name is Joe. Email is hello, okay? Now this user was obviously created before we added our validations for email. That's why this entry was allowed. But going forward, this kind of email would not be accepted by our application. Okay, I'm going to exit out of the console. But now that we have added this validation, validates user ID presence true, our application is no longer going to work the way it is from our UI. Let's test it out. I'm going to start the Rails server. And then preview the application. Okay, if I go to new article, title of new article, hello new article, description, this is body of new article, create article, I have a validation error. It says one error prohibited this article from being saved, user can be blank, okay? So now we have a problem because in our articles controller create action, we need to take care of this. We need to provide it with a user ID. And when we implement authentication for our application, that will be whoever the user is logged in. But till then, we need to provide the user ID. So we're just going to hard code this in our articles controller temporarily. So go to app, controllers, articles controller, and over here in the create action, we need to provide a user. So I'm going to hop on the console again. So cd code Rails projects alpha-blog and then Rails console. Now because we have that association, let's grab the last article that we created that actually had a user ID. So we'll do something like this. Article equals article.last. Okay. Now if I do something like this, article.user, it gives me the user object. So if I do something like article.user.username, I can reference to different parts of the user object. Like over here, I referenced username. But as you saw, I can simply do this. And this is possible because of the association, because we added the has many articles and the belongs to user. And we can test out this association in reverse. If I grab the user, we know that Joe's user ID is 2. So I'll say user equals user.find and give it ID 2. So now my user object is Joe. Now if I type in user.articles, because it's a one-to-many, articles will be plural, it lists out all of the articles that Joe has. Okay? Now if I grab another user, user equals user.last, which is Masroor, username, email masroorexample.com. Now if I type in user.articles, it's an empty collection because my last user doesn't have any articles, but the query still worked. User.articles just didn't return anything, but it still worked. Okay? So let's go ahead and update our articles controller based on what we've used here. So I'll exit out of here. Okay, in our articles controller, I have to give it a user. So article.new article params. I'm going to hard code the user over here. I'll say at article.user equals user.first. Okay, save that. So this is going to ensure that my article has a user. Now let's try it out. Let's try a new article. New article. I'll say title of article and then body of article to test user and create article. Article was successfully created. This time it got created. Now if I go back here and jump to Rails console, and this was the last article, so I'll do article.last. Notice how the user ID for this article that I just created with the description body of article to test user ID of 2 got automatically filled in. Okay, so that's looking good. I'm going to exit out of the console right now. Now there's something I want to show you at this time which will come in handy later on. Anytime you do development, is basically debugging. Okay, if you look at gem file under group development test, you have this gem called bybug. Okay, this allows you to debug on the fly. So all I need to do to use debugger is, let's say in the create action where I had this issue, right? If I simply do debugger and I had gotten rid of this line that I had just added, which was article user, save that, and then let's try creating a new article. Title of article, body of article with debugger, create article. What debugger does is this form was being submitted to the articles controller create action. And since I put in debugger in the create action as the first line, it basically stops the server from running. Okay, it pauses it. So if I look at my server output right here, notice this bybug line, it basically paused my server. So at this point, if I type in article params, I see title of article, description, body of article with debugger. I can view the article params that got passed in. Now if I type in n, hit enter, it goes to the next line, if article.save. Okay, then if I hit n again, it goes to the next line. All right, but anyway, this will come in handy later on. When you need to see what's being passed in your params, you'll be able to see that. Okay, so to exit out of the debugger, just hit Control D and it goes back to working the way it was. Now I noticed while I was doing that, my server timed out. So over here, that's fine. I'll simply go to articles new. And then I'll try again. Title of article again. Actually, I don't want to do this right now. I'm going to first bring back this line. Save that. Title of new article. Body of article with user ID and debugger. Create article. It stopped it again. So if I go article underscore params, that's great. If I hit N, goes to the next one. Now, if I hit N again, notice now I can do something like this at article.user. It gives me the user. Now that's the object reference. So at article.user.username, Joe. Now if I hit Control D to stop this, it goes through with the request, and over here I have article was successfully created. Okay. Now there's another bit of debugging that I want to add, but I want to add that to my view over here, to all my pages. And what am I talking about? Over here, back in my wrapper file, which is the wrapper for all my views, which is my layouts, application, HTML, ERB. Under this render layouts footer, I'll put in this line. Embedded Ruby equals, and then debug, open parentheses, params. Okay, close parentheses. And I only want to show this if rails.env.development question mark. Okay, close embedded Ruby tag. Basically, I want a display of debug params if rails.env is development. Okay, so let's see what that does. Over here, I'm going to reload this page. Notice how it added this area over here. It's telling me that the controller over here for this view is articles controller. It's saying the action is the show action in the articles controller. It's saying the ID of my article is 19. Now this can also help when you're running into errors. For example, when you're trying to submit a new form, if there are errors in the new form and the submission doesn't go through, it'll display all the parameters of your form over here. All right, back to my IDE. We have successfully implemented our association between user and articles and added some validations also to ensure that user ID is saved with each article. Now over here, I'm going to shut down the server and it's time for a commit. Now, if I have my console open, I want to exit. Okay, no, I don't. That's good. All right, so git add -a, git commit -m. I'll say add association between user and articles and add debugger view, close quote, hit enter. Okay, now let's merge this to our master branch. So git checkout master, git merge user article dash association, hit enter. Okay, now git push to push our code to our repository. Perfect. Now one thing I would add is anytime you do this and follow this method of using feature branches, if you have files open from the feature branch, just make sure you get out of them when you're done, because otherwise you may get confused later on about the changes. All right, if you haven't merged your code back to master, you may have conflicts there. All right, so that's all I wanted to cover in this video. I'll see you in the next one.